like to greet everybody joining us in our next in the series, Conversation with Resilient Leaders. To our conversations, we invite leaders who can share their experiences of dealing with difficult situations in business, in their personal, professional lives, and who, in spite of all the difficulties, manage to become successful and happy. We are living in a very unpredictable world now. If you are successful, it is even more painful sometimes to face the difficulties that may come. But resilient people always know that difficulties is something from what you can learn. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is courage to continue that counts. These are very wise words from Winston Churchill. Today, the conversation will be hosted by Abby Severino, Avartis partner in Pittsburgh, the USA. Abby is a recognized executive coach and consultant who strongly believes in the power of leaders to build the world for the better. And the leader she has invited for the conversation is Liz Fetter. Liz is an extremely interesting person with wealth of experience. She is 5-time CEO, corporate and non-profit board member, and investor. So please meet Abby and Liz.
Thank you, Elena. And Liz, welcome to our Avartis Conversations with Resilient Leaders. We're very grateful that you joined us today and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to give a brief background and then we'll dive in. And our viewers are soon going to see why Liz is coming to us at a perfect time. While most of us have not lived through a pandemic, some have learned lessons from previous leadership experiences, as Elena said, that can teach us how we can be at this moment. And Liz Fetter is one of these people who has learned and has applied her lessons. And as Elena said, she's been a CEO 5 times. She's worked in the tech space. Just one example of the type of work she does. She was a CEO of a $2 billion networking division, developed and implemented a turnaround strategy that revitalized the division and the morale. She improved the margins, reversed the downward trend in revenue, and actually went from last place to first place in customer service. So that's just one nutshell for you. Her specialty is rejuvenation or transformation. So she brings new life into businesses. She also has other interests beyond that, which you'll hear a little bit about, I think. So she served on 12 corporate boards, 13 nonprofit boards. She's led an IPO and numerous M&A transactions. And in addition to her tech positions, she founded and runs a real estate investment company, and she has investments in California, Montana, and Pennsylvania, which is where I am. And Liz is currently writing a book about her experience with North Point that she will tell us about, hopefully. That's called Patha Mata Matha Mata. And she'll tell us what that means. So as you can tell, Liz is a true Renaissance woman, and we are in transformation in terms of leaders in organizations from a slightly different perspective at Avartis, but I think we have much to learn from Liz in terms of the ways that you've had your hands on the wheel in terms of sort of the hard business operations, but also the people side. And so we very much are looking forward to hearing. And where I would like to start with you, if it's okay, is just to ask you, Liz, where did you grow up and what did you want to be when you grew up?
Thank you, Evie. I grew up on a small farm in central Pennsylvania, not that far from where you are in Pittsburgh. And I was the second of 5 children. And my father was in education and my mother was a nurse. Very traditional upbringing, I would say, with a focus on school, getting good grades, church, family, and industry, meaning being industrious. I was an avid reader from a young age. I started reading at 3 or 4, and I 3 or 4 years of age, and read, in particular, the childcraft portion, what was called childcraft of the World Book Encyclopedia, which had vignettes, short stories of famous people. And I was particularly intrigued with some of the women that were discussed there. Women like Marie Curie, like Amelia Earhart, like Eleanor Roosevelt, and took a lot of inspiration from those women and what they had done in their lives. But I loved crime shows, and I decided at an early age that I wanted to be the female Perry Mason.
Oh.
And I know I'm dating myself by mentioning that show. This is now the 60s and 70s, so keep in mind the time frame. But I wanted to be an attorney, a trial attorney, until later in my college career.
And what did you major in, and what did you end up doing once you were out of college?
Well, I majored in a what one might call a soft undergraduate major, liberal arts, communication studies. I'd always loved public speaking and writing and communications, and so I majored in that. But my goal was to learn how to think, learn how to talk, learn how to write, and get A's. So I went to Penn State University, which is the state university in Pennsylvania, which was close to home. And but I was studying abroad in my junior year in England, and I was talking with some of my friends, and we were talking. I had a few friends who were headed to law school, as I was, and we started talking about what attorneys really do. And I was still enraptured by Perry Mason getting the bad guy and having these very, very dramatic cross-examinations on the stand where the truth was revealed, etc. And some of my friends said, well, Liz, that was TV. And 98% of the attorneys in the world do what can feel like a massive research paper. There are these huge books with fine print, looking up case law and working at all hours and all of that. And I thought to myself, that doesn't sound like something I'd like that much. So when I went back at the beginning of my senior year now, I was nearly done with all my credits and getting my degree. I went to see my advisor, Dr. Jerry, and I said, I have this dilemma. I don't know if I really like law school. And he asked me a question that I had never thought of before. Hard to believe when you hear it. But he asked me, he said, well, Liz, what do you like to do? And I thought to myself, and I thought about my high school and my college experiences and all of that. And I said, I like to run things. He said, it sounds like you could be, you could enjoy a career in business. Well, no one in my family had been in business. It was all education, medical, those kinds of fields. And so I thought, So I tucked that in the back of my brain. When it came time to graduate, I interviewed, and this was in 1980, and the economy was very bad. The only jobs were retail jobs, being a sales clerk or something like that for a person with a liberal arts degree. So I decided to apply to business school, and decided I needed to offset or balance out, complement my very liberal undergraduate education. So set my sights on either MIT or Carnegie Mellon, which were very technical. Ended up going to Carnegie Mellon and went from there.
Great. Wow. So the liberal arts seem to have served you and asked you that great question that channeled you. And, obviously it seems that there's quite an alignment between what you like to do and what you've been doing in your career. And I would love to have you reflect for us, kind of jumping forward, as you reflect on your career, what are some highlights in terms of feeling a high sense of job satisfaction? And what did you notice about that question that Dr. Jerry asked you that perhaps, maybe you revisited along the way?
In thinking about that question, The first time I really felt, I would describe as exhilaration at work and felt like I was doing what I was meant to be doing was when I was working for a consulting firm in the second half of my 20s, a strategic consulting firm, and I was sent to Australia to work on a project with what was then the largest company in Australia, BHP, in Melbourne, Australia. And what was a two-week or month-long project turned into 2 years. I kept selling business, and ended up setting up an office, running teams, and we ended up getting, by the end of 2 years, 7 out of the top 10 companies in Australia as clients. And I just loved it. I just thought, this is it. I just want to do this for the rest of my life. I really, really loved it. And I think the reason why was it was something that I was doing on my own. It was very creative and resourceful. I had to get office space in a foreign country. I had, knowing no one there. It just was very challenging, but very enriching. And I really felt terrific about that experience early on.
So creativity, having a sense of control, a sense of adventure, it sounds like, were some of the factors.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and could you bring us to one of the biggest challenges? I mean, you're probably, I don't know if you like the term turnaround, but it seems like that's your niche that you've come into. And tell us about one of the times where you were really in a situation that seemed untenable, and where you were able to apply some of your gifts and what you had learned about resilience to help you to get to the other side.
I have to say the most difficult situation in my career was around the age of 40 when I was the CEO of North Point Communications. And I'm actually writing a book about it at the moment, where I had been on this was during the dot-com boom and then quick bust. And so it was around just around the year 2000 or just before then. And I, had built a company. It was a rocket ship. It was, high profile, all of that, negotiated a deal to essentially sell the company for some strategic reasons that the board and I had agreed on, the board of directors. And I loved all of that, although it was kind of one of those 24/7 jobs, very, very demanding and stressful. But the deal fell through, and we had to go into bankruptcy. It was a very high-profile shutdown of the business. We eventually sold it out of bankruptcy to another large company, and this was in the telecommunications space. But my name was all over the Wall Street Journal for driving it into the ground. And I mean, it was a very, very public failure and humiliation.
What did you draw on, and how did you lead through that?
Well, I think I from a very young age, I learned this actually from my mother and my grandmother, is when the going gets tough, and we had some tough times growing up in our family, put one foot in front of the other, get going. And a phrase that I've heard that they didn't use, but put on your big girl panties and some lipstick and get on out there. And I also have had a penchant for action my whole life. I'm very quick to, I have the ability to very quickly assess the dynamics of a situation. People always tell me, "Oh, you're fabulous in an emergency." And this was an emergency. So I had to act very, very quickly. And I gave myself one evening of crying about it, about 2 days in, where I literally for 3 or 4 hours just sobbed about the injustice of it, what I felt was the injustice of it. I felt I'd been scammed. I felt I'd been taken advantage of by this other company. I felt bad because I was going to have to fire everybody, shut the business down. And I allowed myself that release. And then the next day it was, forward go. So I learned that those elements of resilience, I think, from very much from my mother and my grandmother in our family growing up.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think that's the vulnerability sort of enables you, it seems like you're willing to put yourself out there. And I'm wondering if there were any ways that you learned, probably based on your values that you came in with, but also just dealing with the people side of things. And, you've done a lot with teams and change. And what are some of the ways that you kind of shared your own values, or, shined a light on some of the other people that were in some of these situations with you?
Well, in the North Point situation, we had a full team. It was a public company at a $7 billion market cap. It was a kind of a big deal. And they, so I had my CFO was my comrade in arms. We had the whole, everybody had a sales, had a marketing. I also had some outside consultants, Bain and Company, who helped me through. There was, of course, years of litigation and all kinds of things trailing, but helped me with the banking side of things. So it was a matter of calling on help, but also exhibiting strength. I had, throughout my life, I have taken a lot of responsibility when I've been in leadership positions for the success of not only the company or the organization we're in, but also bringing other people along and helping them to see the vision, and also supporting them along the way. And our very first team meeting, which was with the board, which was about 1 hour after I found out that the deal was dead. I said, guys, the buck stops with me. The buck stops here. And we are going to get through this one way or another. I want all of you to stay, stay, don't flee the sinking ship, please. I asked the board to stay, and made just was, tried to make very compelling, really emotional arguments, based in fact, based in situation, that we had a couple of avenues, and we were going to weather this, what turned out to be much larger than our company, really a perfect storm in the whole industry and the whole .com and telecom industry meltdown. At the time, I was feeling like it was just us. A few years later, I realized that we'd actually fared pretty well, given the destruction and all of what was going on around us, with other companies in the market. But it was exhibiting a compassion for people, because everyone felt as bad as I did or worse. Some people, like our CFO and our business development guy who negotiated the deal, felt like it was their fault because, whatever, something in the contract. Other people felt like if only they'd done this, if only they'd done that, we wouldn't be in the situation. And I really gathered people together and said, we are where we are. We all have things we wish we would have done better in retrospect, or differently. We're going to march forward, and I want everyone on the team, and I want everyone here, and we're going to develop a strategy and move forward and execute on that. And I did feel like a little bit of to borrow some current parlance from the media, a wartime CEO. But I somehow I found the strength within me to go forward. And, every day I was doing something I hated, like laying off 1,000 people, telling them that, no severance, nothing. Today is it. Go to the bank and cash your check, because, it may bounce tomorrow. And so it was very, very hard. But I learned a lot about myself through that process. I felt like I had been really fired in disaster, and tempered. My character had been tempered, and I was very gratified at the end of it, although you know, and it really was about a 2 to 2.5 year process with litigation and all kinds of things. I really felt gratified that I had been, that kind of come through the fire and was still standing and would go on and didn't know doing what yet, but would go on and use a lot of those lessons in my future life.
And I know your book translates to something like learning through suffering, and it sounds like the suffering is definitely, you know, we've heard some of the parts about that. I wonder if there's any special lens that you would put on the North Point experience or your other experiences when it comes to gender. Is there anything that you could share with our audience about, you know, what you've picked up over time in terms of being a business leader and being a woman?
Well, I have to say that my career has been, just quickly, has been in all very male-dominated fields. You know, petroleum first, strategic consulting, then telecommunications, then technology, and then boards. And I was always, up until about 3 years ago, actually, and that's a long time, I was always the, you know, sometimes the youngest person in the room, almost always the only woman, and always the most senior woman in the room, no matter what the venue was. And I really felt like I was out there, you know. I wouldn't call myself a Susan B. Anthony or you know, Harriet Tubman or anything, but I really felt that I was at the front of the field to show, to live, to through my work, really show what women in business were capable of. And I don't know if I would call it a calling, and I never really played the gender card, if you will, although I had, you know, had my own dose of sexual harassment and everything else coming up. But I got some excellent advice from my male mentors. My mentors were also male. You know, be humble, learn, deliver, always, you know, do what you say you're going to do, and use a sense of humor, which was one of the most useful ones, to deflect ugly situations or you know, emotionally charged situations at work. So the female mentors that I looked to were those that I mentioned early on in this chat, which was those women that you know, in different fields over the last 100 years that we all hear about, like an Amelia Earhart, or others, women who were out there doing things that had never been done by women before. And so those were really the people that I looked to, given the lack of contemporary mentors, female mentors.
Liz Fetter, thank you so much for inspiring us with your stories and helping us think about what we can use from your story to inspire us forward as we live through this unprecedented time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Liz. Thanks a lot for sharing these fantastic experiences that you have been through. And frankly, listening to you, another quote from Winston Churchill came to my mind. If you are going through hell, keep going. So,
yes.
And I would like to thank Evie very much for hosting the conversation and for the interesting questions that helped us to know Liz better. So we are planning to have more conversations with interesting and resilient leaders. And not to miss our future conversations, please subscribe to our channel. And do not forget to click on the bell icon so that you can get notification of our next video. We would also be grateful to you if you share it, press like it, and write your feedback in the comment segment. You may also propose questions that you would like us to ask to the leaders we are going to have conversations with. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Bye-bye.